welcome. We're here today. We have the distinct honor of being here with Dr. Dean Ornish, and we're going to take a look at his new book, Undo It. And now that it's been out for a couple of months, I'd like to see what kind of feedback you've been getting in terms specific to the book of how it's affected people, you know, what's working for people and things that are working less so, that kind of thing.
Yeah, well, thank you. It's good to be back. And I've been very gratified by the reception the book has got. It's made most of the national bestseller lists. So people are getting it. And we're getting a lot of great feedback. You know, the book was to try to distill down the over 40 years of research that I've directed showing what a powerful difference changes in diet and lifestyle can make. You know, we tend to think of advances in medicine as being something really high-tech and expensive. And I think our unique contribution has been to use these very high-tech, state-of-the-art scientific measures to prove how powerful these very simple and low-tech and low-cost interventions can be. And the more diseases we study and the more mechanisms we look at, the more evidence we have to show how quickly people can get better in ways that really matter. And I put forth this unifying theory that has met with a much greater degree of reception than, and positive reception than I expected. I mean, it's very different than the way I was trained, and in fact that all doctors have been trained, which is to view, you know, I was trained to see heart disease and diabetes and prostate cancer and breast cancer and Alzheimer's disease and high blood pressure as being fundamentally different diseases with different diagnoses and different treatments. But what I've learned over the years is that it wasn't that there was one set of diet and lifestyle recommendations for reversing heart disease and a different one for reversing prostate cancer or diabetes or whatever. It was really the same for all of these. And that got me thinking about, well, why is that? And what I realized in kind of the aha moment, you know, was that these are really the same disease manifesting and masquerading in different forms. And I say that because they all share the same underlying biological mechanisms, things like chronic inflammation, overstimulation of the sympathetic nervous system, oxidative stress, changes in the microbiome, and telomeres and gene expression and angiogenesis and so on. And every one of these mechanisms in turn is directly influenced by what we eat, how we respond to stress, how much exercise we get, and how much love and support we have. Or to reduce it down to its essence, to eat well, move more, stress less, and love more. Boom, that's it. And so I thought that this would be a pretty controversial unifying theory. And yet all of the people that I've spoken to, and particularly those that I respect the most, who are in you know, leading scientists and physicians and educators and so on, say, you know what, that makes perfect sense. And I think the best ideas are the ones that, you know, when you hear it, you go, yeah, well, that makes sense. You know, of course, everyone knows that. And then you realize no one said it before, you know. So I actually had to go back and make sure, you know, people had different pieces of it. They say, you know, inflammation is seen in a lot of different diseases and so on. But it's really much bigger than that. And that radically simplifies the recommendations because, again, it's the same lifestyle program that can reverse and therefore prevent a wide variety of chronic diseases.
You know, I always, what I find fascinating about all this, because you've been in this for the long haul, and I've been around this stuff also, like intuitively, you can just think about your life and know that if I'm more relaxed, I'm going to be in the zone, or I'm going to be more effective at work. If I'm more relaxed, I'm going to feel better. I'm going to miss less sick days at work. But now I think what's incredible and part of the whole paradigm shift is that it's backed up by science. And the science is backing up the fact that it saves money for hospitals, for people, for organizations. So what about the intersection of this kind of grassroots wisdom and the effect that science is, you know, having and giving it legitimacy?
Well, to me, that's the value of science, is to redefine what's possible and thereby giving, at this point, millions of people new hope and new choices. I mean, everything that I and my colleagues have done over the last 40 some odd years was thought impossible. People thought there's no way you can reverse heart disease. Maybe at best you can slow down the rate at which you get worse, but that's about as good as you can get. And we showed for the first time you could actually reverse it. Instead of getting worse and worse, you can get better and better. We did the same, you know, when people are put on medications to lower their cholesterol or their blood pressure, their blood sugar, and they say, doctor, how long do I have to take these? What does the doctor usually say?
forever.
Yeah, it's like sometimes when I lecture, I'll show a cartoon of doctors busily mopping up the floor on a sink that's overflowing. And it's like, how long do I have to mop up the floor? Like forever. Well, why don't we just turn off the faucet? And what we continue to find and continues to amaze and inspire me is that the more diseases we look at and the more mechanisms we look at, these same lifestyle changes can reverse so many of them. So we found, we did the first randomized trial showing that these same lifestyle changes can reverse prostate cancer in collaboration with the then chair of urology at Memorial Sloan Kettering Cancer Center and at UCSF. You can slow, stop, and even reverse the progression of men with early stage prostate cancer. And it's probably true for breast cancer if it's true for prostate cancer. We did the first study showing that when you change your lifestyle, it actually changes your genes. That was thought impossible. When I was in medical school, we were taught the only way you can change your genes is to change your parents, which of course you can't do, that you're stuck with them, but your genes are not our fate. We did a study which we published with Craig Venter, who was the first to decode the human genome, that these same lifestyle changes could change over 500 genes in only 3 months, in every case in a good way, in a sense, turning on the good genes and turning off the bad ones. And we did a study with Dr. Elizabeth Blackburn, who got the Nobel Prize for discovering telomeres, the ends of our chromosomes that regulate how long we live. They're like the plastic tip on the end of a shoelace that keeps your shoelace from unraveling. They keep our DNA from unraveling. And over time, as they replicate, the telomeres tend to get shorter. And as our telomeres get shorter, our lives get shorter, and the risk of premature death from all of these chronic diseases goes up correspondingly. We found.
So what you're saying is size matters with
size.
telomeres.
That's right. And we found, and we'll come back to that point in a moment. And we found for the first time we could actually lengthen telomeres. And when we published it, they called it reversing aging at a cellular level. From Size Matters, by the way, there's a film called Game Changers that comes out in a few weeks that was made with, when James Cameron, who made these wonderful films, Terminator and Avatar and Titanic,
Sure.
is also an explorer. And he learned that 10 years ago, that more global warming was caused by livestock consumption than all forms of transportation combined. So he went on a plant-based diet, he and his wife, Susie. Has so much energy, they're actually making Avatars 2, 3, and 4 at the same time. I went and visited the set. But they made this wonderful film in collaboration with Luis Hoyos, who got an Academy Award for The Cove, and James Wilkes and Joseph Pace, showing that, and there's this wonderful, basically the film is about addressing the biggest myths that people have about a plant-based diet, which is you're a wimp and you don't get enough protein. So it has all these elite athletes who became Olympic medalists and heavyweight boxing champions and mixed martial artists, national champions, and so on, when they went on a whole foods plant-based diet. And I was one of the medical experts in the film. And there's a wonderful scene in there where they have these 3 athletes in their mid-20s, and they feed them a single meat-based meal. And it was high, organic, grass-fed beef and organic chicken or pork and so on. And then they measured the frequency and hardness of erections they had at night when they slept, which is
okay.
And then they did the same thing a day later with one single plant-based meal and measured them again. And they found that they had 300 to 500% more frequent and 10 to 15% harder erections after the plant-based meal than after the meat-based meal. In fact, the film crew became vegan after shooting that. And it shows again how, not only how powerful these simple changes are, but how quickly you can show improvements in ways that matter. An erectile dysfunction is actually one of the best predictors of heart disease, because if your penis isn't getting enough blood flow, chances are your heart and your brain aren't either. And even a single meal can make a difference for better and for worse. And so I think that's going to really wake up a lot of people. But getting back to your question about, so size does matter, and so getting back to the money, we did I started a nonprofit 501c3 public foundation called the Preventive Medicine Research Institute back in 1984 when I moved to San Francisco from Boston. And through that, we began training hospitals and clinics in the early 90s around the country. We trained over 53 sites, academic centers like at Harvard and Beth Israel, New York, and UCSF and so on, and also community hospitals in various places. And it worked. We got bigger changes in lifestyle, better clinical outcomes, bigger cost savings, which we'll talk about, and better adherence. And yet a number of the sites closed down because we didn't have insurance reimbursement, which was a really painful lesson.
Because of what?
We didn't have the insurance to reimburse it, or Medicare. And so the painful lesson, I thought, if we just did good clinical outcomes, that should be enough. But if it's not enough to have good outcomes, if it's not reimbursable, it's not sustainable. So I started going to insurance companies and I said, would you cover this? A lot of them said, well, 30% of our patients change jobs every year. And so they change insurance companies usually. So, and it may take years to see a financial payoff. So why should we spend our money today for some future benefit that some other company is likely to get? And I'd say, because it's the right thing to do. And that was not the most persuasive argument I could muster. So then I realized that because these biological mechanisms are so dynamic, and because it turns out that 5% of Americans account for 80% of healthcare costs, and 86% of the $3.6 trillion we spent last year on what are called healthcare costs, which are really sick care costs, are for treating chronic diseases like the ones we've been talking about, heart disease, diabetes, et cetera, that when we focus on the people who have chronic diseases, we found that we could cut costs in half in the first year. And when we looked at the subset of those patients that the insurance companies, in this case it was Blue Cross Blue Shield of Pennsylvania, had spent, called Highmark, had spent at least $25,000 in the previous year. In those patients, they cut their costs by 400% in the year that followed. And so Mutual of Omaha, we did a separate demonstration project with them, and they found that they saved almost $30,000 per patient.
Unbelievable.
Almost 80% of the people who were told that they needed to have a stent or a bypass or an angioplasty could choose our lifestyle program as a direct alternative. And so the cost savings were dramatic and immediate. And so that became the game changer. And so after 16 years of being reviewed by Medicare at CMS, they created a new benefit category to cover my lifestyle program for reversing heart disease. And most of the major insurance companies are doing that. So we've been training hospitals and clinics and physician groups around the country. And again, we're getting bigger changes in lifestyle, better clinical outcomes, bigger cost savings, better adherence than anyone's ever shown. I mean, 94% of the people who go through our program finish all 72 hours of it. So most doctors say, oh, I can get my patients to take a pill, but there's no way they're going to change their lifestyle. But the pill doesn't usually make you feel better if it's like a cholesterol-lowering drug or a blood pressure pill. But the lifestyle changes do. As we talked about, your brain gets more blood. You think more clearly. You have more energy. The hippocampus, the part of your brain that controls memory, can get measurably bigger in just a few weeks to a few months. That your skin gets more blood, so you look 10 or 20 years younger. Now, I'm 96. I think I look pretty good.
You look great.
I look like over 95. Your heart gets more blood. You can reverse heart disease. Your sexual organs get more blood in the way we talked about. And so what you gain is so much more than what you give up and how quickly that occurs. And that's what makes it sustainable.
It's incredible how almost binary everything is. It's like, is your body contracting or expanding, or is it in health mode or in regression mode? And there's it's not quite homeopathy, but it's like the smallest little changes. Like I have friends now, there's one friend who just, he has a dilemma. They found a touch of prostate, something going on. So do they go in and operate, or do they try to do lifestyle change? This person's not holistic minded at all, this particular person. But that's a real question coming up for people all the time. And I think it's just phenomenal. You could have one healthy meal, and it's not going to cure things necessarily, but it can absolutely turn the healing switch on somehow.
Well, it's true, but it's not binary in the sense that I wrote the book. The current book is called Undo It. It's about reversing chronic diseases. In part because my favorite key on the computer has always been the undo button. And I thought, wouldn't it be nice if we had that in our lives?
Right.
And we do. But also my spiritual teacher for many years was Swami Satchidananda, who liked to make puns. And people would say, what are you, a Hindu? He'd say, no, I'm an undo. So
right.
Kind of homage to that. But the book I wrote before that was called The Spectrum. And it was based on the finding in all of our studies, which surprised me. I had thought incorrectly, as it turned out, that the younger patients who had less severe disease would do better when they changed their lifestyle, but it turned out I was completely wrong. It wasn't how old they were, it wasn't how sick they were. It was simply a function of the more they changed, the better they got at any age, which is a very important.
Again, the more they change,
the more they improved in ways we could measure, and the better they felt, which made it a virtuous cycle. And so if you're trying to reverse a life-threatening disease like say heart disease, that's a pound of cure. It takes a lot to do that. That's why we were the first to prove we could reverse all these conditions, because most people didn't go far enough. But if you're just trying to lose a few pounds or get your cholesterol or blood pressure or blood sugar down, you know, what matters most is your overall way of eating and living. And so, and also I've learned that, you know, even more than being healthy, most people want to feel free and in control. And as soon as I tell somebody, eat this and don't eat that and do this and don't do that, you know, they immediately want to do the opposite. It goes back to the first dietary intervention, you know, when God said, don't eat the apple, and that didn't go so well, and that was God talking. So what I learned is to say, look, and once you call foods good or bad, it's a very small step to saying I'm a bad person because I eat bad food. So then you might as well just, you know, finish the burger or the pint of ice cream because you're a bad person. And the whole language of behavioral change has this kind of moralistic, shaming, judgmental, you know, bullying, fascist quality to it. And so what I decided to do was to say, and I came across this idea because I chaired Google Health with Marissa Meyer 11 years ago, and we were trying to come up with all these complex algorithms for personalizing a diet and lifestyle. And I thought one day, I said, you know what? I don't know if you ever had those moments where you realize you're going about something the wrong way. I said, I think we're going about this the wrong way. We're making this so complex, so much friction. Why don't we make it radically simple and say, look, you decide how much you want to change. Let's categorize, instead of calling foods good or bad in the binary way, let's just say there's a spectrum of choice. So I categorize foods from the most helpful, group 1, which are the usual suspects, you know, fruits and vegetables and whole grains and legumes, you know, as they come in nature, low in fat, low in sugar. Group 5 are the most unhealthy, you know, the usual suspects again, bacon and pork rinds and sausage and donuts and things. And groups 2 through 4 in the middle. And I say, okay, so first decide where you are on this spectrum. What do you eat? First of all, what do you want to do? I want to lose 20 pounds. I want to get my cholesterol down 50 points, whatever. Great. How much, what are you eating now? I'm eating mostly unhealthy group 4 and 5 foods. So then instead of saying, well, eat this and don't eat that, because then people want to go to the opposite, to say, okay, how much are you willing to change? Oh, no one's ever asked me that before. Oh, I don't know. I'll eat less of the 4 and 5 and more of the 1 through 3. Great. How much exercise are you getting? Oh, not that much. How much are you willing to do? Oh, I don't know. No one's ever asked me that. People always telling me what to do. Okay, I'll walk 20 minutes a day. Good. How much love and support do you have in your life? Not enough. I'll spend more time with my friends and family. How much yoga and meditation are you doing? 0, but maybe I'll meditate 15 minutes a day. Great. So we support that degree of change. And again, it's not all or nothing. If they indulge themselves one day, doesn't mean they cheated or they failed or they're bad, all those, you know, judgmental words. Just eat healthier the next. You don't have time to meditate for an hour? Do it for a minute. Whatever you do, there's a corresponding benefit. And then we'll track it. And then after some period of time, like a month or so, we'll recheck it. Let's say you wanted to lose 20 pounds and you lost 10, or you wanted to get your bad cholesterol down 50 points, it came down 30. Say, look, hey, you're on the right track. Now just move a little further onto the healthy end of the spectrum, and you can get the rest of the way. Now, if you're trying to reverse a life-threatening disease, you really do have to follow the program.
It's a heavy lift, yeah.
But for most people, and it's a much more compassionate approach to take the spectrum approach, because you can't fail. There's no diet to get on. If you go on a diet, chances are you're going to go off it. But there's no diet. It's just a way of eating. It's moving the trajectory in a healthier direction.
And that's true, because in a binary world and in general, no one really wants to be told what to do. But if you include people in the decision, then all of a sudden, you're not a saint and you're not going straight to hell. You're somewhere in the middle, and you can do things incrementally and have exercise, you know, incremental control over, you know, because what you put in your body and your stress level is really paramount in all this. I have a question. You said there's a new benefit category that, is it Medicare or the health insurance people?
Medicare in 2008 created a new benefit category called intensive cardiac rehab, which is to cover my reversing heart disease program. And most of the major insurance companies, Aetna's covering it in all 50 states, most of the Blue Cross Blue Shield plans are covering it, and so on around the country. If you go to our website, which is ornish.com, my last name, ORNISH.com, there's a section in there on the sites that we train where Medicare will reimburse that, and most of the insurance companies will. And people, instead of getting a 10-minute office visit where there's really not time to talk about much of anything, it's a 72-hour program. So people come twice a week for 4 hours at a time for 9 weeks. And each time they get an hour of exercise, an hour of meditation and yoga. I would have thought, you know, that'd be covered by insurance. An hour of a support group, which is really more of a sense of community, and an hour of a group meal with a lecture. And it's a team approach. There's a doctor, but also a nurse, a meditation and yoga teacher, an exercise physiologist, a dietitian, and a psychologist, and they all work together as a team. And after they finish their 72 hours, they continue to meet virtually using Zoom like we're doing now, because they've already bonded with each other, and that sense of community is so powerful. And we've learned what really enables people to make sustainable changes is not fear of dying, it's joy of living. And when you make these changes, because as we talked about earlier, these biological mechanisms are so dynamic, most people feel so much better so quickly in ways that really matter to them, that it reframes the reason for making these changes from fear of dying or fear of something bad happening, which is not sustainable, to joy and pleasure and love and feeling good, which really are.
That's incredible. I remember we recorded you, wow, it's a long time ago, back in Omega, 30, God, I'm getting old. Back in the day, and it was all pioneering then, the whole holistic approach to heart health, and now you went and did it. Intensive cardiac relief, huh?
Intensive cardiac rehabilitation.
Rehabilitation.
And we're hoping that some of the insurance companies are covering it for more than just heart disease. Some are even covering it for just, high blood pressure or high cholesterol or obesity or combinations of that. But we're still doing pioneering work. We're in the middle now of the first randomized trial to see whether these same lifestyle changes can reverse the progression of early stage Alzheimer's disease. And I think we're at a place with Alzheimer's very reminiscent of where we were 40 years ago when we started doing research on heart disease. In other words, it has the same mechanisms involved biologically. The interventions, lifestyle interventions that have been less intensive have slowed the rate of progression, just like they did with heart disease. We think a more intensive intervention might actually reverse it. So if anyone's listening or watching this who lives in the greater San Francisco Bay Area, go to our website, again, ornish.com. There's information on how to enroll in the study, and everything is free.
Phenomenal, phenomenal. So to finish up this segment, one of the things kind of popped out is a whole unifying theory. Mm-hmm. So things just kind of come together. So, what's the impact of having a unifying theory that works not only for heart disease, but general wellness?
Well, not just for wellness, but actually for reversing so many conditions. As we talked about earlier, when people get put on medications to lower their blood pressure, their blood sugar, their cholesterol, they're told they have to take them forever. And we found that, again, under their doctor's supervision, they can often reduce or get off these medications. Our bodies have, in many cases, a remarkable capacity to begin healing, and much more quickly than we had once realized, when we can simply treat the underlying cause. And so the unifying theory provides a scientific and biologically plausible explanation of why these simple changes are so powerful. I mean, the biggest obstacle I often find in talking with people about lifestyle, I go, oh, lifestyle changes, everybody knows that, that's kind of boring. Give me something really powerful, like a new drug, a new laser, a new device, whatever. We think it has to be expensive and high tech to be powerful.
Anything but take responsibility or make changes, right?
That's right. But just the idea that lifestyle changes can actually reverse disease. I helped pioneer a new field of medicine called lifestyle medicine, which is using lifestyle changes to actually reverse disease and treat it, not simply to help prevent it. And again, it's working. I think it's the most exciting field of medicine, with Walter Willett at Harvard and David Katz at Yale and others, is this new field. We're actually certifying and doing board certification and so on in it. And the enrollment of the annual conference doubles every year. This year will be close to 2,000 people from over 60 countries. And so it's changing. And so part of the value of this unifying theory is that it radically simplifies what we need to do. People are bombarded with information, and people have done no research at all, and make all these claims and tell people what they want to hear. Bacon's good for you if it's grass-fed beef, and pork rinds and sausage are all health foods, and they're not. And again, that's part of the value of science, is to show that. But we're able to radically simplify and say, look, it's really the same disease. It's just manifesting in all these different forms. It's the same lifestyle intervention. I mean, people get that most people realize you don't have to do one kind of exercise if you have heart disease, and a different kind of exercise if you've got diabetes, and a different kind of exercise if you've got prostate or breast cancer. It's exercise, And the same is true for diet, it turns out, and the meditation, yoga. And that makes it very simple. And so when you're treating and preventing one disease, you're actually treating them all. And it helps explain why many people have what are called comorbidities. They'll have many diseases at the same time. They'll have high cholesterol, and they'll have high blood pressure, and they'll be overweight, and they'll have heart disease, and they'll often have type 2 diabetes, and so on. And so again, we can help reverse all of those at the same time with these same lifestyle changes. And that makes, it also helps explain why in China, and 60, 70 years ago, they had almost none of these chronic diseases. But when they start to eat like us and live like us, they start to die like us. And so there, more people are dying in almost every country in the world now of chronic diseases than AIDS, TB, and malaria combined. And it's diverting a lot of resources away from things that really do require drugs, like AIDS and TB and malaria, to things that can be largely prevented or reversed by simply changing their lifestyle. And the supreme irony is that the diet and lifestyle that we found can reverse and prevent all these conditions is what they were doing before they started to copy us. And they have the same genetic diversity as we do, but it doesn't matter, let's say if one person's able to, for genetic reasons, they're more efficient at metabolizing or getting rid of the dietary cholesterol and fat they consume. But if they're not eating that much of it, then those differences really don't matter so much. And so this radically simplifies it for people.
Right, the whole unifying theory, I think it's profound and it's simple at the same time. Okay, so Dr. Ornish's new book, along with his wife, is Undo It. And it's been a pleasure talking with you. Anything else you want to say, or how people can contact you before we wrap up?
No, again, to me, awareness is always the first step in healing. So thanks for giving me the chance to raise awareness. I love doing this work. For those who are interested in learning more about it, just go to ornish.com. It's all free there. And the book is available everywhere. It's my wife and Ann and I wrote it. It's the first one we've written together. It's kind of the yin and the yang. She brings a beautiful perspective and voice to what we're doing. And so I hope that the people who get this book find it as useful as most other people have.
Thank you very much. That was great.